call to order the council budget workshop for August 6th, 2026. Before we begin, do we have anybody for public comments?
No, sir.
All right. You know, this meeting has been on my mind a lot, and often it's on my mind at 2 and 3 a.m. So being on council, there are good days and then there are hard days. And in some ways, this is a hard day because not only do we want to provide the services that our community expects and wants, we have to figure out a way to pay for it. On top of that, we've had a second natural disaster. And the estimates of infrastructure damage and damage to homes is significantly higher this flood for the city of Kerrville than it was last flood. I'm thankful to staff. I'm supportive of the budget that you presented. But we represent the people of Kerrville. And so this is a time for us to ask questions and to make sure that not only we understand what is being presented, but be able to answer questions when citizens have questions. In addition, today, Councilmember McKinney and I want to have at least a brief discussion about the city attorney budget, which has been a subject of emails between the Councilmember McKinney and with the city attorney. The reason I think today is the best day to talk about it is we're talking about the budget, but also we all five are here, and so it's an agenda item that we can focus on. As we talk about the general fund, we can easily talk about that without having to have a special section of future council meeting just for that one topic. So, as we go through, sometime during our discussion, not at the beginning and probably after the presentation, let's have a brief talk about the city attorney budget. All right. Thank you. Anybody else have a preamble? I'm glad to see you all here. Thank you for your hard work. And who's going to start us off? You or Julie?
I can start us off, Mayor.
Go ahead.
So we have a quick 4.5-hour presentation for no, I'm just kidding. No, we're here to provide some updates. You know, as we go into this, just be aware there's a lot of things that we still just don't know. You know, we last year we were able to have some estimates, and I think they were very conservative last year. There's a lot more unknowns this year on those estimates, but we are doing the best that we can with what we got and with the information that we have at our disposal. We definitely expect a lot more budget amendments, to come out through the year as information becomes available to us. And so with that, Mayor, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. Ms. Behrens.
Good morning. So this will be our third and final budget workshop before we actually present the budget to you. Our job, I think as you said, Mayor, is just to provide you with the best information we can so that you guys can make the best decisions you can for the community as we're moving forward. So definitely want to answer questions. I will tell you that we have spent many hours getting to the point regarding the tax rate calculation. I want to kind of walk y'all through some of that. And then if there's specific questions that you have, of course, we can dive into that a little bit deeper. I did actually print the tax rate calculations for you, and I'll provide those to you before you leave today so that you can have those, but they are in the back of the budget book as well. So very quick update on the flood as we go through, and as Elton said, we only know what we know at this point. We have received our insurance disbursement of the $5 million proceeds, so we're working through priorities with Public Works and Parks and those guys, and aligning those resources with insured assets. So that's something we're working on right now. And then we're also reviewing funds that were allocated to 2025 flood projects that may have been in progress but not completed, and how those things overlap and what does that look like. So we're working through some of that to see if, based on some incomplete projects, could some of that be reallocated and things like that. So a lot of cash flow work going on related to flood. No FEMA disaster declaration at this time, so we're hopeful that staff in general has been working with TDM very closely to try to give them all the information they can so that they're pushing it up to the right channels to do that. So as Michael presented, estimated damages right now exceed that $55 million. We don't know, what we don't know, and he's smiling because that's the last number I have. So yeah, we know.
I'm not smiling.
I know that, but, yeah, so that was the last number that we had that was a good number to go on. We know that damage assessments were not complete at that time.
Comments,
Um,
Mr. Martins?
I just got some opinions of probable cost for some stuff. I'd like a minute to talk about that with Kyle Burrow, but for Town Creek and for our Kitty Lick Bridge, not terrible, not a great number, in excess of $2 million. For that, Town Creek is a whole other conversation. That is, yeah, let me get back to you on that.
So,
It looked like he had something to say.
Well, there's just been a lot going on, and so we're relying on Michael for a lot of that information, but that was the last information we had, a huge number, compared to last time, you're right. Our general fund balance, fund balance is healthy. We've been working through that. We do that all the time to try to keep 5 to 10 years ahead. So, as you know, our policy of fund balance is 15 to 25% of our total expenditures for each year, and so we look out further in the distance to make sure that as expenditures are growing, that fund balance is equally growing so that we have those reserve levels met. So one of the things Trina and I have been working on is what is our dollar over fund balance requirements, and so then we would know how much, quote, I guess, liquid cash we would have without impacting our reserve requirements. So we're working on that as well. And so as Dalton said, potentially, once this budget is adopted, we will most likely have budget amendments that we have to bring to you. The hard part is we can't change the tax rate. So once you adopt a tax rate, then we're gonna have to live within those revenues, and then our other revenues, maybe netting changes in expenditures, which, we've already kind of reached out to departments and be sitting down with them because this budget was primarily built before this flood happened. So we're gonna just go through and look at how we're going to make some adjustments to move some things around to take care of the business we need to take care of. So 2026 flood continued. Just want to remind anyone listening, also this will be posted online, that we are letting everyone know that if you were impacted by the flood, you can apply for a property tax exemption through Kerr Central Appraisal District. And we have a QR code that we provided, but it is also on KerCAD's website as well. And so as of this past Monday, they had 7 property owners already apply for an exemption, and they have 105 days from the date of the disaster declaration to apply for that exemption. So we expect more to come in, but we're still trying to just push that information out to people so that they know if they were impacted to definitely apply for that. And then, of course, still encouraging people to report property damages on the TDM site so that we can continue to track that so that FEMA has that information. Any questions on any of the flood things?
Any questions so far?
Okay, and Michael will continue to give updates on that as we go through other council meetings and things. So let's jump into the general fund. So what we're going to talk about today is the proposed property tax rate, any notable changes that we made since we met the last time, rate calculations, and then some supporting data that I pulled for you. Legislative changes that are going to be directed towards the disaster tax rate calculation, and then some other rate scenarios. So as we go along, please stop me and we can talk through this, but there's some things I think that will kind of come together for you as we go through this. So currently the general fund is balanced, about 14.48 million. That is a slight change from the last time we met, and I will talk you through those. So the next page, this chart is not really indicative of the full rate calculation, but just to give people an idea, it's just a summary look at how we have to work through the tax rate calculation. So we did receive our certified roll about 4 o'clock on the 27th, so last Monday. Took us a couple of days working with Bob to get the tax rate calculation worksheet complete. Ultimately, that is the responsibility of the tax assessor collector. We do have a very good working relationship with them, and there's information we have to provide to him for that, especially related to debt and TERS, and then information that only he has that we don't have regular access to, like refunds have been issued over the years and some other things that go into that. So once he gets that, the 3 rates are established that are critical for our work and be able to estimate revenue, and that's the no new revenue M&O rate, so the maintenance and operations rate, which goes to the general fund, and the no new revenue voter approval rate. So anything in between there, council can adopt without election. Anything that exceeds that voter approval rate, then of course has to go to election. The debt rate is what the debt rate is. That is not a negotiable number. By law, we have to pay debt first. So you'll notice as we go along, our debt did drop. So that happens for a multitude of reasons. So once we have those rates, we line them with multiple scenarios and some internal processes to kind of start estimating what revenues look like at different scenarios. And that's where we are today to bring that information. So just kind of a highlight, as I guess you don't really realize until you're in it, there's 82 steps to get to the known revenue rates, just in case anyone wanted to know that. So the next little blurb here is just to let you know that because council adopted a disaster rate last year, there was an extra step to this calculation, and that is figuring the difference between what the voter approval rate would have been compared to what the voter approval rate that was adopted. And so that then has to be backed out to be able to, I guess, recoup the emergency portion of that rate. So when you look at the tax calculation worksheet, you will see a known revenue rate that is higher because you have to calculate that first before you back it out. So this year was a little bit different, but again, all that supporting documentation is in there. So it does reduce, the 27 voter approval rate by the difference of that. So remember that when you're looking at certified rolls and you're looking at tax rate calculation worksheets, you're looking at information related to levy, not budget. And so there are some different processes there we've talked through in prior years. So based on the levy, the emergency revenue was about $323,000. And keep in mind, there's some adjustments in there that are not in our budget. We estimated, I went back to the 26 presentation, that estimated dollars from disaster would be about $400,000. So pretty close. We're on a $14 million budget. I'll take that differential. So big question, of course, why did the known revenue rate increase? That is one that I will tell you that I've struggled with myself. And we probably spent more time on this tax rate calculation than we have ever spent in the past, especially because of the emergency recoupment part. Talked to a lot of professionals, a lot of people that, okay, obviously I'm missing one. Let me back up a slide. Sorry, you guys. So the property tax rate as proposed in the budget, this is what you saw in your budget that you received, and that is also posted online. A total property tax rate of $58.46, with the maintenance and operations rate of 0.4454, and then you can see the different rates throughout there, and of course all of these were calculated within that worksheet. So reduction in debt does also provide a little bit more of a rate component in the maintenance and operations. So when debt goes down, the maintenance and operations can go up. So our debt rate went down from 1406 to 1392. So you use the same values to calculate both rates. So, all right, I had skipped a slide. So the next one is really something that we struggled with a lot to make sure that we were bringing you accurate information. So we worked with Bob super close on this. He also consulted attorneys that he works with that provide advice to the tax assessor collector. We reached out to some people within GFOAT, which is our finance organization, specifically people who had to work through emergency before, and had them review everything as well. So we're confident in the numbers after all the rocks we've kind of turned over to make sure. And so the big question was, why did the rate go up? Well, the big things are outlined on this page, and I have some supporting data to back this up as we go along. So the tax ceiling increased by $71.4 million. So that is big. That's not just frozen, but primarily frozen. You have some other exemptions that fall into that tax ceiling as well. Then the exemption increase was $69.7 million. So we talked about the impact of House Bill 9. So $57.5 million was related to business personal property. So that $141 million number comes out of the known revenue calculation. So when you pull that number out, we kind of backed into this and did it. It's about 3 cents on the rate that 141 million impacted the rate. So these were questions that we spent a lot of time just making sure that we had the data to support that increase. Because if you look at adjusted taxable, so this is after you remove the ceilings, it's almost flat with last year. So when you have a flat taxable value, and then you have 141 million that's reduced on top of that, then that answered the question pretty clearly once we got to that point. So this is just giving you some data in case you're asked. We can put this into information or any way that might be a little more clear, but I tried to bullet it so that you could use it if you needed those talking points elsewhere, because the tax rate calculation worksheet is really complicated. I wish it wasn't that complicated, but it's hard to work through. Unless you work through it over and over and over, it's hard for someone to understand who doesn't do that. So anyway, those things are on there for you as well, and we can talk through that more if you would like. So the next page here is our revenue and rate scenarios. So we do have proposed in the book at the total voter approval rate of 5,846. So it has the revenue there of 14.4 million. It also shows you revenue that would approximately be generated at the no new revenue rate, and then also at the voter approval rate without the inclusion of the 0.0048 unused increment that we still have remaining. I will point out that the 0.0048 is 2 years of increment, so one of those years would fall off if we didn't choose to use that this year, but it's minimal. So that 0.0048 does not make a big difference, as you can see there. On the difference in those two revenues. So the big question for us, and if you remember last year, Kirk gave us an estimated lost value number of 65 million. It came back at 2 million. But given where we were in the year, there was no way for her to accurately give us an estimate. She didn't give us an estimate this year. We just plugged an estimate of 20 million in lost value. I can't give you a really true rhyme or reason. We had to use something as an assumption, and just looking around, basing it on what actually came back last year. But again, that 20 million on 4 billion doesn't make it's not a huge impact to the revenue. So it was immaterial unless we really get into the 50, 60, 70 million dollar lost value. It's not going to make a big difference as far as the revenue. So we did cross-reference everything. Like I said, we feel really good about these numbers being conservative, but wanted to give you a couple of different looks at things that we calculated. So the next page here is notable changes. So these are things that you will see in different than was in our 724 workshop, but that were included in the proposed budget. So property tax obviously changed once we got the certified roll and worked through all these little parts and pieces we just talked about with you. KPUB franchise fee is increased, and that's based on very conservative updated KPUB projections. So Amy's really good about providing us information from her side to let us know what they're thinking. We were still conservative. So where did we put the additional revenue? So we put 100,000 to contingency within the operational budget. And my thought process there was, if property tax misses, that's an expense that maybe would offset that if we didn't have to use that. So how do we stay in balance if property tax revenue comes back less than we expect, which I feel like we're okay. We increased the transfer out to KSP simply because we know that they are not going to have we already had 200,000, knowing that might even be a stretch. But with these new damages, we don't expect to be able to open fully the Riverside anytime soon. So 50,000 doesn't help them a lot, but might close the gap on some of their lost fund balance. Transfer out to asset replacement, 50,000, and then the big one was transfer out to CIP. So that just gives us a little bit of money to put toward repairs that we might need. And again, staff's gonna have to work through reallocation of what we had planned on doing for some projects or maintenance kind of components, and maybe make some adjustments there as well. So if council were to adopt a different rate that's proposed, then these are the areas that I would recommend are kind of the easiest buttons to bring us back into balance.
Before we change from this slide, the KPUB franchise fee isn't a change in the rate, it's a change in KPUB's predicted
That's right.
revenue.
That's right. So Amy's really good about providing us what she estimates their projected revenue is going to be, but no change to the rate.
And what I want the public to hear is this is not a change in the franchise fee rate.
That's correct. That is correct. Okay. So these next slides really is just supporting information from what we've kind of already talked about. You saw this chart before, so this is just historical net taxable property values. And the reason I started at 2022 is because 2020, 2021, you really saw a difference with the change in from SB2, with the change in how the state allows cities to adopt rates. And so it was a little bit different look, but this is really consistent look at what our current structure is with the 1.135% allowable. So you can see just change in net property values there. The next one is just information on House Bill 9. So when I talked about the total exemption increase of 69.7 million, the general fund impacted that as 310,000. So when we talk about, I guess, spreading the burden of those exemptions among other taxpayers that are non-exempt properties, then that 310,000 is really what you're looking at spreading out because of this 69.7 million increase in exemptions. And that's not all related to BPP, but 57.5 million of it is related to BPP. Now that should level next year because that's going to be a one-time. You'll see that fall off, and you're not going to see that big jump every year unless there's some that didn't apply for that exemption yet. So we could actually potentially see some refunds from that if people didn't know that exemption applied. So historical exempt property, I think this is important because you can see the actual impact there and the jump from one year to the next just in exempt property. And again, these are things that are removed from that no new revenue rate calculation. So really has an impact on the overall rate. The next one, a little bit different from what we showed you last time, not much different, but our tax ceilings growing by 71.5 million, or 6% this year, had a pretty big impact. So, when you look at the number of frozen properties or tax ceilings for other reasons, that does impact our revenue. So 318,000 estimated in the general fund if this were fully taxable, just on that piece to revenue, and then 99,000 increase in what I'm going to call lost revenue to the debt fund that then is also spread out among other property. And the next one is, I did include it in the, I actually think I had this one hidden because I was on and off about adding another one for tax ceilings, but this just shows you growth in the tax ceilings over the years. So pretty big jump there. New value, of course, this hasn't changed from last time. It stayed the same. We got our certified roll, and then we have outlined who the largest contributors to new value were. It was a much smaller year than last year, but last year was a pretty big year for us, well above average. So, when we calculate what value comes from new properties, that money comes after the no new revenue rate calculation, but with all the reductions in values, we kind of wiped out the benefit of that new value by that offset in those exempt properties. So, again, impacting the roll or the rate. So let's talk just for a second about disaster rate calculation for fiscal year 27 and what that looks like. So as you know, 2602 of the tax code allows entities to direct the tax assessor collector to calculate a disaster tax rate under certain conditions. So Bob is not able to even perform that calculation without direction from this council. So we do have a resolution on the agenda on Tuesday that is in front of council for consideration to direct Bob to do that calculation for us. That doesn't mean that we have to adopt that. It doesn't mean we're recommending adoption of that. It just means we can't even tell you what that is with a hard number without him performing that calculation. So that'll be council's discretion. I think the big point to remember here is the calculation changes from the no new revenue rate times 3.5% or the no new revenue rate times 8%. It is not 8% over the rate or over the revenue. So I think last year there was a big misconception that we're increasing taxes by 8% by that adoption, and that's not the case. It's just the difference in setting a rate at 3.5% over no new revenue or setting a rate at 8% over new revenue, or anywhere in between. You don't have to go all the way to the 8%. or you can adopt none of it, which, that's going to be up to council. So there have been some changes in the law. So last year, simply having the declaration of disaster allowed us to do that. And this year, that's not the case. We're gonna actually have to prove that we have expenses within certain categories that exceed the amount that would be generated from that rate, even to consider that. So the state has been very specific, so removal of debris or wreckage, and then essential assistance. And so I made a list in here of those essential assistances. So they're not going to take into consideration permanent repairs that the city might have to make to infrastructure. That is not one of the allowable reasons to adopt a rate. So we have to submit those estimates of related costs to TDM for review, which since we're working with them, they already know what those costs are, but we still have a lot of things to estimate. So Julie's estimates, not Bob's estimates. I can't even look at anything that he would have to say about this without your direction, but just doing some quick math, if we collected 100% of property tax and you were to calculate the rate at my estimate of 8% over, it's $390,000 or less. So it's not a big impact at the end of the day. So again, that's, you and Dalton can talk more about that if you have specific questions. Those are just the factual components.
Just to confirm, essential assistance does not fund fixing streets.
That's correct. It would cover, or it would not cover, but the estimated cost that we would provide would be associated to things like debris removal, and then essential services, shelters, some overtime, and water testing. So there's a few things, but it is primarily emergency response type situations.
And we can document that.
Yes, sir. As much as Michael's been working with TDM, and TDM is in the loop on what those things cost, but we would have to estimate, and then we would have to prove those expenditures exceeded the revenue generated from that emergency rate.
The resolution of direction on the next council agenda does not adopt the tax rate.
No, sir.
It merely allows the tax assessor to calculate that rate. It doesn't adopt it, and if the council chooses to adopt it, it'll be like last year. It'd be a separate vote, a separate voice vote, actually.
It would be part of your tax rate adoption within the budget, so that ordinance that we would bring to you on consideration of the proposed, of the rate, yes.
However, if we don't ask him to calculate that, we no longer have that option.
That's
It's
correct.
taken off the table.
That's correct.
So basically, all we would be doing is just asking Bob to tell us how much money that we could,
He won't tell you how much money, he will tell you the rate difference, and then I would have to apply that.
that you would
Yes.
tell us.
Yes.
Julie, I asked you after the last meeting or sometime to kind of dumb this down for me. I'm gonna ask you to do it again for anybody that's listening or wants to watch this later, but it's not adding, if we did the full 8% to the M&O, it's not adding 8% to what we added last year.
No, so when we talked earlier about the recoupment of the emergency rate, and it is within that tax rate calculation worksheet, we actually had to determine the difference between what our voter approval rate would have been minus the disaster compared to the disaster rate, and then apply a revenue, it's a calculation to say we expect this much revenue was generated from that disaster rate, and then reduce the overall rate by that. So basically reset. Your no new revenue rate doesn't have anything to do with last year's rate at all, despite sometimes there's some confusion between last year's rate times 3.5%. It's not that. It is the new established no new revenue rate based on the values this year. It doesn't, we just take the rate kind of out of your mind for a minute. We have to establish that no new revenue rate based on the values that are on the table. So it's completely different. It does not stack.
There's been a lot of questions.
I know,
Like, you're
and
gonna add 8% to what you did to us last year, and that's
No.
not the case.
No, that's not the
It's-
case. And so even without the disaster rate calculation, that no new revenue rate being higher has nothing to do with the disaster at all. It is solely based on the calculation of values when you look at prior year compared to this year.
But it would reset the clock, so to say, on the time frame, correct?
Well, it's a new disaster, So,
So we started one last year, I think, what's 3 years?
right, so
And then-
3 years, but
So now we start over with a new, fresh 3 years.
yes, it won't stack at all. And remember that if, when council adopted the emergency rate last year, the next year's determination of whether that could be used again depends on whether your adjusted value is
Right.
lower than last year or not. And our adjusted value was flat, with last year 0.08% or something like that. And so we were over, so it wouldn't have been an option anyway. So it has all to do with your value growth or loss.
This is just one of those that needs to be very transparent with everything we talk about. Just
No, I
because you
agree.
say new taxes and everybody freaks out and goes up in arms about it. So thank you for everything that y'all have done, and Trina and Jacob and everybody in the office, because it's, you say taxes and it makes your hair on the back of your neck
No,
stand
it
up.
does, and that you're not wrong about that, and so we try to provide as much supporting documentation as we can to say, but again, it's complicated, and so we just try to be really careful about how we communicate that, so.
But we also suffered 2 devastating years back to back.
Did-
If I might
Please.
interject and add to some of that devastating part. We had been in contact with TDM about cost estimates for our damage. And what we assumed, just looking at the road at Town Creek, that the damage was, I think, $4.5 million is what we used as the estimate. What FEMA needs to see, what TDM needs to see is bringing that back to pre-flood conditions, right? So as it was before the flood, Town Creek. The estimate on that is anywhere between $40 and $57 million.
Oh my gosh.
Now that is bringing back Town Creek to pre-flood conditions. And we have to have that estimate because we have to show that to FEMA and say, this is to bring it back to what it was, because that is their requirement. Now, what are you going to do? Obviously, we are not going to do a $57 million road project on Town Creek. That's road, that's sewer, that's water, that's earthwork. I think $15 to $20 million worth of that is earthwork, right? And so, sorry, that's why I left, because I got that right. We started talking and I wanted to make sure I had my ducks in a row. So that is bringing back this whole thing exactly to the condition it was prior to the flood. What would that be? And that was a monumentally scary number. And so that's not what we're going to do. That's not what we had planned to do. We have to have that number in order to turn it over to FEMA and say, we need an alternate. And we're going to start working on an alternate that doesn't bring it back to exactly what it was. And that number will be significantly different. We don't yet know what that number is, but
Is that Town Creek starting closer to I-10? I mean,
that is I-10 all the way down to Main Street.
that's a long way, yeah.
Broken down between I-10 and Holdsworth, it's $6 million worth of dirt work. Same again between Holdsworth and Shriner, and then a little bit less between Shriner and Main Street. It includes water and sewer, it includes the roads. There's some, obviously the engineers are always concerned and they inflate some numbers in there to, keep things where it is. I've spoken to you many times about engineering projects and we haven't been so lucky, when it comes to like, let's get that number super low. But this checks a box with FEMA to have that conversation, but that almost doubles just our portion that well exceeds the statewide minimum for a federal declaration.
So that puts about $102 million.
You minus out the 4.5 that we put in for this project and maybe another 4 that we put in for water and sewer. So 50, 100. Probably.
Let me translate for the common person on the sidewalk. Residents depend upon that road to access their homes. Families depend upon that road to access a cemetery. In fact, one burial has been postponed until it's safe to transport deceased to their burial site. On that, water and sewer, if I'm correct, help serves the James Avery Craftsman campus. And so when you think, oh, that's just Town Creek, it's basically a narrow little road that's cute to drive on. It's a lot more than that. That link between downtown and the area around the interstate and the area just north of the interstate, specifically James Avery Craftsman, is vital for our community. It's not a, I wish we could do it someday, it's a, it needs to be done.
Yes, sir. Project. And David has been in contact with Barrera with the funeral homes, and we're coordinating with them, with the streets department. We will be working as fast as we can on that first portion of Town Creek.
I've seen you bladed it, it's been bulldozed, so it's passable.
It's close to passable right now. I would say we would say it's ready to go. People could use it, right? It's going to be a little dustier than everybody wants it to be, but you know, we don't want folks to have to continue to wait for that service for their families. So we're triaging kind of most important, not
I understand.
working our way through it. James Avery has been really fantastic to work with. They're being patient with us. They have a portable water capabilities right now, and their sewer it's not an issue for us to manage it the way that we're managing. We are working through the sort of temporary water line to get them back up and running. And then I'm going to go yell at a bunch of things after we get done here and figure out the real number. That makes sense. I think Town Creek is going to look different. I think the access points will be different than they currently are. Everyone will still have access, right? That is a requirement for us, that if you had access before, you have access now. You will. The way that looks.
You need emergency vehicle access.
You're right, exactly. So we've been looking hard at it, and we'll continue to do so, and we'll come up with some good game plans for y'all that don't include that number.
Thank you. Any questions for Julie or Michael?
Well, as talking points for what Jeff is referring to when you're talking to a voter, a taxpayer, citizen, this green box seems to really be a good way to, you know, explain the benefits of having this 8%. And it might be helpful to know specifically what happened after last year's tax, what got fixed, what got better, what specifically, and if we could list out the general things that are gonna be helped, but it might be nice to say, for instance, last year's increase helped us do this. And I'm not saying stop what you're doing and work on that.
Oh, no, those are pretty easy buttons because, again, it's not a big number. And so I think that's
I know.
important to remember is it's not a big number. And so when you're talking about even 55 million,
I know.
Ideally, we go to debris. And debris,
For this
once
year,
once we bring some of that to you, I mean, we're looking $1 million, so it's not even gonna cover a third of it.
Well, that's another point though for us, you know, to make is that we're doing everything from the smallest thing to the largest thing, whether it comes from the government. You know, we're working on every angle, every opportunity, and this is just one of them. I wouldn't want it to be more of a burden on taxpayers, but at the same time, if it was me and I knew that my difference that I paid really helped in some small way, I might think, okay, you know, it wasn't just talk, it really did, you know, have a benefit.
and last year we did an analysis of median home value and in multiple scenarios to say at the proposed rate,
Right.
this is what we anticipate, you know, with no exemptions or anything like that, just a
Right.
ballpark.
I remember
Compared
that.
to, you know, what the 8%, and of course, we would provide that to you again, just so you had
Okay.
informational, once we actually have that rate, you know,
difference,
what
yeah.
I presented to you today is my estimations, but that's not an official rate calculation, so without that, I wouldn't wanna put a solid number, but I mean,
No.
it's not hard math,
Right.
to say the impact is small, and, you know, is the difference enough? I don't know.
Yeah.
That's a council decision, not my
So,
decision.
I don't like the thought process that $300 and some thousand is small. I know it's a small percentage in a way, but there are 100 different ways we need to conserve our cash. And $300-some thousand is not small potatoes, not to anybody that I know, and most of the taxpayers will think that's a small potatoes. And we got overwhelming amount of money that we have no idea yet where we're going to come and get all that money. And so let's don't think about, well, that's a small number, because I don't care if it's 20,000. We need to save 20,000 every chance we can.
Julie, didn't you say it was $40 a household?
I'll have to
Roughly.
go back and look at last year's numbers to tell you that exactly, but we did a basically calculation that said at the adopted rate, your taxes on an average is about X, and then an 8% rate, it would be about X, so that we could show you what the growth is. And so, I will definitely provide that number to you.
I've got a comment just on talking about things. Michael just hit it. Very good hit on it. The big stuff is being worked on, is being looked at right now. Staff is doing a phenomenal job. I feel like I've bugged Chris and David a little bit too much recently because I have people reaching out to me and asking about things. Staff is doing what they're told to do right now. And if it means mowing grass in one area, well, that's gonna keep rodents and critters and everything at bay. But the bigger picture is they are doing what they're being directed to do. And let staff do what they need to do. Because the bigger picture is they're trying to take care of everybody right here, right now. And there's been some emails, there's been phone calls, and it's just like, well, why are they doing this? Why are they doing this? Why aren't they pulling debris out of a bridge? Well, that's not what they're being instructed to do right now. That is not the big picture. The big picture is a $47 million road improvement now. So things like, and I'm not laughing at it, I'm not laughing at the situation, it's just, that number blows me away. So it's, you know.
Maybe a good letter from the manager, city manager, or somebody, mayor, whatever, you know, just an editorial type thing that might say,
It's,
in case you are not aware of what the city's been, you know, charged with doing, and is doing, and is accomplishing in some ways already, you know, to give them a little,
love. I'm looking at
explanation.
Kerrville Daily Times right now over my shoulder, so it's just, you know, we lose our water plant. We get our water plant back up. K-Pub flies
No kidding.
a cable over on the drone, which was amazing.
It was.
But, you know, things like that, that's the big picture. So that's all I'm saying is I'm praising staff and I'm asking for forgiveness from the public as well while we ferret through everything, so.
Julie, did you get to the point of comments or questions?
Yes, please.
Does anyone have any comments or
Please.
questions for Julie?
I think I already
Everybody?
shared my thoughts.
Kent? No? Julie?
Well, let's let Julie go. More to talk about, yes.
Ms.
Okay,
Smith?
we do
Ms. Smith,
She
any
did
questions
great
for
job.
Julie?
All right, let's talk briefly about the city attorney budget. As I understand it, as presented, the city attorney budget calls for the hiring of an assistant city attorney.
Also, as presented, the overall expense in that department is less than what was budgeted in the previous budget.
Mr. McKee, where would you like to start?
So far, I think we really have, we're not outsourcing enough work to fill another attorney's time. And it'd be cheaper to continue to outsource. I think definitely William needs some assistance. William's doing a great job. Nothing derogatory about that. The work is coming out quick, and there's been really an improvement over maybe prior times. But we need to at least try to get by without a second attorney and give it a better effort, or a longer term effort, and see how outsourcing goes, and or I think some sort of a legal assistant could be tried and see how that works before we get back into the habit of having a second attorney.
Any council comment?
Well, I guess I would be curious to know how what do you feel, William, about your workload and having an assistant or outsourcing?
Well, let me just say I wasn't prepared for this today, so
Okay, sorry, I didn't mean to
no,
put you on the spot.
that's okay.
I'm the one that put him on the spot.
And I haven't reviewed the budget since the last time it was provided. If the only question is whether or not we should outsource or have an assistant, I don't disagree with what you're saying in terms of right now, maybe. But if we are saying outsource and a legal assistant, then I think if you're gonna pay for a legal assistant, you might as well, instead of that, pay for an assistant city attorney, because you get more out of an assistant city attorney than you do a legal assistant. That's what I would say.
Well, you do if you have that much work to do, and right now we don't have that much work. And
Yeah.
so I don't mean to say that we should do both outsource and the legal assistant. I think the legal assistant would hopefully provide you some relief on your time, and somehow between the two of you, you could manage what's getting outsourced. And so, anyway, I think it's worth trying to do something that's short of having two attorneys, which is, my understanding, not a common practice for cities our size. And we're not demonstrating that we're outsourcing more expense, as much expense as another attorney would be. So let's try to get by for a while and see how it works. And try and see if you can find an assistant, and what would your job description be that would help you enough that might your current load offload to an assistant for you to delegate some of what you're doing, and see how that works, rather than just throw up our arms and say, well, we're saving money from last year. Well, that's not necessarily enough. You need to see how much we can truly save, and I think it's the time to experiment a little and see. Our budget constraints are enormous, and we need to try and see how this works.
Is there, sorry.
Go ahead, please. Sorry.
The work that is currently being outsourced, is there anything, there's nothing to say that that rate can be increased, or are we locked into a contract for that rate?
Well, what we're outsourcing currently are specific projects. And so we are outsourcing municipal prosecution, and we are outsourcing responses and questions related to Public Information Act requests. And so if we wanted to outsource more, I'm not exactly sure what we would outsource at this point.
We
Because
don't need to outsource more. That's not really the question.
My question is, what currently is being outsourced for municipal court? Do we have a contract with them for a set rate, or could they say, okay, starting September 1, we're going to increase?
yeah, so their set rate is set. I believe that right now it's 180. That's the cheapest we could get.
Okay.
And it's the only local person that would respond. So if but yes, I have an email out to them asking whether they want to continue doing this. I've not received a response. If they choose not to, yes, it is going to be more expensive per hour.
From a legal perspective, is this a potential conflict of interest? And this is their field of work to defend people, and here they are serving as prosecution.
So it's not a conflict of interest, but I have heard from the court clerks that it is causing an issue in how the prosecution is going. So it's not a conflict, but it does impact how they are prosecuting. So I believe perhaps, or, and this is just hearsay, I've not seen this personally, so let me be clear, this is hearsay. But from what I'm hearing, I believe it is causing more deferrals, easier, what people would consider easier sentences, more dismissals, things like that. But that is not necessarily a conflict, it is just another way of how you prosecute.
I think he should get an assistant if we continue, Kerrville is growing, then he can, I'm the newbie, so I don't have anything to go off of, everything, so what Ken is saying, all the work that you've, all the responses that you've given me has been very prompt, but, whether it's a junior attorney or something like that, straight out of law school, then all of that can be done in-house. And, everything that is currently being sent out can be then done in-house, and then you can focus on if Julie's projections are estimated correctly at what we're looking at moving forward.
Elaine, I think you were the only one on council when we hired William as an assistant. Do you remember why that happened?
Workload,
Workload on Mike?
that's all I remember,
You almost had to force that, didn't you?
Well, I believe we had a lot of new projects coming at us, and that required a lot of extra work that wouldn't be your normal year, you know? We just adopted the 2050 plan, and then we had developments that were coming at us, the Granger, McDonald. There was just a lot of things. I just remember he was overwhelmed, so. I guess I kind of understand what Crystal's saying, though, in that when you do have an in-house assistant city attorney, they're representing us 100% all the time in every case that they would be representing us, as opposed to outsourcing, which is, you know, if you have to outsource, if I thought outsourcing would be a temporary thing, I think I'd be thinking, okay, good, this until we get over this hump of a lot of work, then we're stable and you won't need an assistant either, but I don't see that happening. I kind of see more work coming your way. So I know it's not in the budget, but I mean,
Actually, the budget number
It
that
does
Julie
include-
has includes his
well, and that's
assistant
what I was
already.
just about to say.
Or somebody.
An assistant
Somebody.
does, the 272, yeah.
I know the bar just took place in San Antonio for 2 days. You know, there's a whole bunch of new, young attorneys. Or I guess they'll find out, 2 months if they're attorneys or not in November. So,
Yeah.
but, I mean, I know, talking to the county, that they're bringing a couple of them in the thought of passing, and they're unpaid right now. Obviously, they're not able to practice law because they don't have their bar card, but they said if they can fit it into their budget, they're gonna pay them like $65,000 a year to start, and that's an attorney. So I look at, you know, different things. You and I have talked about it, William, as well, with trying to find a young person that, you know, who knows, they might want to be like you and they want to start as an assistant and stay here forever and replace you when you retire or whatever. So I agree with Kent. We definitely need to think about how we need to be efficient with everything, but I also know that it might not be the best way to do it either by a paralegal, because that's going to take you back over to if we don't keep a prosecutor over there, that's going to put you back in municipal court. And I just don't feel like the department head, don't take it wrong, but I don't think that's where you need to be as a department head, as the head of legal. You know, so, and who knows what's going to happen with the current prosecutor, because I've heard rumors that they don't want to keep doing it because it's stretching them thin on what they're doing. I know that when we talked about it before, the next closest one was 250 or 225 an hour plus mileage from San Antonio to and from. So it's, I don't know. It's just one of those we definitely have to dive in and crunch numbers on and look at. But
Well, we should experiment.
Any other comments, Mr. McKinney?
Just so, you know, we can experiment, you know, we could try something that's cheaper. if it doesn't work, we're not in concrete about it.
What I think I'm hearing, and I may be wrong, is a consensus that we continue with the budget as presented and that we hire an assistant city attorney. Is that a fair thing to say with a more majority of council? As you work through this process, and as the chance for experimentation with outsourcing comes, I hope you'll do it. Also, I know that you have posted the job.
I know that was removed.
Okay. The
Pending
budget
this
has not yet
conversation.
passed.
Right.
There's a new budget. The old budget, I think, included funds for an assistant city attorney. New budget, based on the consensus I'm hearing, also includes money for an assistant city attorney. But this is only a thing we could have when the 5 of us are here in a public meeting on an agenda item that's posted. So I'm sorry to put you on the spot.
No, I didn't mean to insinuate that I was offended by that or anything.
But I also wanted to settle it as we're working through the budget. All right, any other I'm surprised it's only 11:30. Any other comments or suggestions or?
Let me, if I may.
Please, of
on
course.
that. On that, with the budget, if it doesn't work out and we hire a paralegal or something for you, well, the money's in the budget, so Julie, could we roll that money back into something else, even though it was budgeted for law?
Yeah,
Technically,
so
yeah.
within the fund, it can be reallocated,
Okay.
as long as within the
So-
same fund, and then outside of fund, of course, would be.
So we can budget for it, but it doesn't mean we actually 100% have to go that route.
Halfway through the year or something.
Right.
Yeah, we'll have evaluations on both of you at the end of the fiscal year, so, all right.
I have a
Please,
question.
please, go ahead.
Separate from, it's for William, but it's separate from William's department. In the budget information that Julie sent us, I'm trying to find it, but it's related to the community funding our community organizations, and it alluded to that we have a contract with them. Do you know, and I am putting you on the spot, do you know do we truly have contracts with them, or is it just?
We do have contracts with certain ones.
Okay,
The only one that, and Julie, maybe you know, but the only one that comes to mind currently is the Callow with Playhouse 2000. I believe they have a contract that requires a certain amount. I'm not aware of another contract, but I'm
They're
aware of that
annual,
contract.
most of them are annual contracts, so you're
Yes.
talking about occupancy
But that-
tax.
Right,
On the general fund community service agreements, they are annual, so they are adopted with the budget each year, and those contracts are not extended. And William reviews those, and then we push those out after the budget's adopted.
right. I'm sorry. Maybe I misunderstood your question. I understood you to be asking, is there a contract that required us to provide certain money to community organizations?
so I'm talking like,
And Playhouse 2000 is the only one that has a contract that requires the city on an annual basis to do it. Every other community organization has annual contracts that we voluntarily enter into to provide them with money from the hotel occupancy tax.
Is it KPA,
so,
Arcadia?
yeah, so it's
Right.
KPA, Doyle, Dieter,
Right.
Hill Country Crisis Council, CASA, Kirk Connecting Case.
Those aren't hot
Those are
money.
general fund.
This
Those
is-
are, right, so
Yeah.
those are separate contracts that are just,
Are they contracts
Are
or
they
just
contracts?
donations?
no, they're
And
contracts.
so what, are they providing services?
So my understanding is that those contracts are providing certain services that the city otherwise would provide. Like they help with strays and things like that for the pets. They help with transportation for things that doesn't require the city to have buses and all. And so that is why they're getting a lot of that type of money.
And the contract's on an annualized basis, so.
Right, once the budget is adopted, then we ask William to redraft those contracts for each agreement. And then they have reporting requirements and things like that within them.
Someone got
So is
stale
it
back.
year over year is what you're asking, like we are committed to this for FY '27? The answer is no, not without council approval.
So we could go and say, we're gonna wipe
everything but Playhouse 2000. I don't know if
Playhouse
that's.
2000 is not
occupancy
in here.
tax.
Okay, yeah,
Yeah.
so,
So we
yes,
could
if
say
it's on
we're
there.
gonna wipe these, or some conversation has been put together, a group of people, and you have to apply for funding. I understand that this would only save
That would
us
be-
$40,000, cause we have 150 for content, for ACON.
And I gotta get some scenarios from them. I need to follow up with them. So we have some options that we could potentially scale back on that if we needed to for a year.
So, what you're leading up to is, this is a place where we can get some money, I agree. I think we just have to look at each one of them as they come up and see, we're kind of tapped out. My view.
And so those agreements don't come back to council, so we would definitely need some direction on that. Because of the threshold, if they're within the approved budget, then we would proceed with those as they are
Yeah, well,
approved within
then
the
I would
budget.
like to take away the approved budget.
Right.
We haven't approved the budget quite.
But no, yeah, based off the direction that we get from y'all, I mean, again, Mayor, Council, if y'all give us some consensus on that. One of the things that Julie and I had spoken about, probably for the last year and a half, was if y'all set a designated bucket of money aside for CSAs, 20,000, whatever y'all put in there, then we would create an application process that folks could then apply for it, and then there'd be a small subcommittee that would review and approve those things, and that could be for events, or it could be for certain things, both for hotel occupancy tax outside of the contractual ones, and then also for the general fund ones. Again, y'all can turn those on and off as much as y'all want, or anything.
Well, it's one of the hundreds of little things we have to sacrifice, I think. I mean, these are great organizations, and I'm very much in favor of them. But we got more financial obligations than we can swallow right now. And, Vicki, that's a little bit of a segue into what I want to talk about.
Go ahead.
So we've got this monumental amount of money being required from us going
I'm
forward.
sorry I even said it out loud.
Well, we had a bigger number we can handle before that, and so it didn't get any better. And so no amount of reserves or annual budgets can touch that number. So I've talked to Dalton about what the council, I think what the council needs is some guidance. We need, first of all, it'd be good to have the base of what's been done so far, because we've been in the disaster mode for a year already. So what kind of things have actually been accomplished. But going forward, we need a plan. We have no idea how big the number is going to be, but we know it's far outside our reach.
Correct.
And so, what are our options? And we need to think of even the little options. And obviously, the big ones are maybe more obvious. So, do we dip into our reserve? What does it take to dip into the reserve? And when do we do that? Dip into the reserve, go on the voters for tax increases, all franchise fees, all these kind of, and the EIC, splitting off some of that for public safety or whatever. We got all this list of things, but we need some guidance from our management team to say, well, this is a list of all things we can do, and this is sort of kind of what we think to prioritize, which things do we do first, and if we're going to accomplish going to the voters, then what are the steps we have to make to get to the voters? What steps do we take? How do we inform? How do we get buy-in? How do we make sure that this guy passes? Because we can't. We just need a plan, and the plan will have to change, but we need at least a place to start, that we got some way, that we know that we got tens of millions of dollars, maybe, and hopefully, we get lots more help, but even if we have paid 25% everything here, that's a lot of money, more than we got in reserve and more if we can raise the taxes and more. So we need a plan. How do we address this? And really, we almost need to go back to every department head and say, how can we do better? Where every little place, I don't care if it's, I don't want this attitude, oh, it doesn't move the needle. Well, if we have 150 different things, they don't move the needle very much, it starts making a big difference. And that's where efficiency really comes from. Not from one big thing, it comes from hundreds of little things. Everything we do every day, we have to think about how can we do it better, cheaper, what can we do? We need everybody's buy-in on this because this is really huge. I mean, it's scary huge to me. And so we need management team to tell the council, this is what we recommend. These are all the possibilities. We recommend these sort of things and this kind of a timeline. And, it may be a loose timeline, but step-by-step kind of things that we can go through. So does that make sense?
Contingency plans?
Pardon?
Contingency plans.
Yeah, well, it's not really contingency. We know. We don't know how much, but we know we're in over our heads. So how do we start? Where do we go? And it's really we can't, I don't think we should really, we're going to need to have budget amendments. That's fine. But I think a plan will impact how the budget amendments are implemented, even right away. I mean, but we need a long-term plan, and then you can fill in what happens to get there. But that starts, now, as soon as we can possibly do that. So I just think that we need that guidance from management to say, these are the possibilities. This is how I think we can tackle the problem.
So in some ways, the budget is that long-term plan.
Well, the budget is completely inadequate for the long term.
Okay.
There's no way with the budget that we have, even out 5 years, that even touches the amount of money that's going to be required to keep our city anywhere near where we were before.
Correct.
And so the budget we have so far is completely inadequate for that. We have to, that would be business as usual. We're not in that scenario.
And you still have to factor in the legislature who may have significant structural changes to municipal revenue.
Right.
A lot of things is going to be hard to predict for a 5-year scenario.
Well, that's true. And so, and the plan will need to be adjusted, but we need to at least start out with something to plan about. What are our choices? And if we think we can do this way and it doesn't work out, well, then we go to the next step. We need a list of things that we could, how do we attack rounding up the money? And I think it's almost one of the, we're after 2 disasters in the second, the worst for the city than the first. It's probably a little bit of everything. Probably going to have to get the reserves. We'll probably have to go to voters for more money. We're probably going to have to do anything we can think of. I mean, everything we can think of. And even the little things. Like I say, it's all those little things that add up that make a difference.
Yes. Any other comments?
Mayor, if I may.
Please.
On the, just kind of for council's edification on it, we have provided some of those solutions. And this is kind of where, this is a policy decision that does come to y'all. And we are kind of at, let's call it, from the staff side, we've gone as far as we can up until y'all direct us from the policy side of things that we can move forward. So for example, I think it was in the first budget workshop, we had some solutions and some challenges on there. So crime control district, fire control district, K-pop franchise, those things. Those are policy options that we could do. Increase go to the voters for a tax rate increase, and really, I'm going to say just using the tax rate increase as an example. there's certain criteria that we have to fall in line from the state. So once we get direction on that, everything falls into place, then we present, what we have. And ideally, just kind of for y'all's knowledge, how we would do that, kind of similar to what we did for the disaster tax rate last year. We would build the voter approval rate off of the build the budget off of the voter approval rate, and we would balance that out. Then the tax rate increase that we would go to the voters for, that would be basically an itemized list. And we could do one-off projects, CIP, fixed asset replacement. You could even tie personnel into that, and say, here's what this tax rate's going to do over the next 2 or 3 years. And then it goes to the voters. If it passes, then we operate on that new budget come December timeframe. If it doesn't pass, then we continue to operate in the voter approval rate, tax rate, because it just reverts back to the voter approval rate. So that's kind of where we're at. We're kind of at some of the policy decision sides of things before we can really spend time, staff resources, in that. If it comes to the expenditure side of things, I will say that we are, my professional side of this is we are at the floor. We have trimmed so much out of the budget. We have put some hiring freezes on certain positions. We've kind of cut FTEs. We've merged FTEs. We've really had, to Councilmember McKinney's point, we've really dove into each budget and pulled contingency and fluff out and really kind of reduced some of those operational things. And so we can go more. However, that is going to be some policy decision on how far do we want to go, because the next step is personnel.
Okay, first of all, can't find any of those savings in the numbers. So what's been done in the past, I'm not saying I think you got a great staff, I'm very supportive of all that, but somehow it's not showing up in the numbers. Now, the numbers are confusing because it's, we move parks and we move the golf course, and it's going in and out of the general fund, and so it gets a little bit. But even overall, the personnel costs are exceeding inflation. We're not gaining any efficiency even to our tax base on property and sales tax combined. So we're not yet. I see some of those things, but then it's slipping somewhere else, or the numbers wouldn't be that way. So you are the CEO of this operation. We rely on you as a board of any corporate entity. We rely on you to run this city. We pay you to tell us what you think. We don't want to be saying, oh, we got all these policy things and just drop it in our laps. We want you to say, this is a way I think we should go. Now, we have to approve that. We have to be sold on which is the best way, but we don't want just to be talked to. We want to have a list in writing. These are the things that we can do, right down to talking to every department head and everybody down to the lowest rung on the chart, the employee chart. How can it be done better, cheaper, wiser? And we don't, so I think we need a list of all the possibilities and your recommendation, not just throw it in our laps and say, well, you decide. It's a tough choice. But you're the manager. You're the one here every day. You know who's got the capabilities and who doesn't have the capabilities. We have to hire somebody to help us plan this. It's an investment, not an expense, because we've got the plan. And so, even if we hire a consultant, I don't care what we do, we got to come up with a plan, and not just drop it in our laps like, oh, well, it's a policy.
Well, and
It's
no,
not technically.
no, and I understand where you're coming from, Councilmember. It's yes, there's this fine balance between the private sector side where, as a CEO, I come to the board, but the board doesn't really vote. They basically, checks and balances on the CEO. Are they happy which direction the CEO is going?
They vote. They vote.
Yeah, and for the vision of it, and again, the private sector is very different than the government sector. At least there's some overlap, and so I agree. And if council wants that, then I absolutely could present, the plans and say, next workshop, hey, we think that a crime control district is going to be the way to go. We're going to put the time, effort, staff time, resources into that, and we can absolutely bring that to y'all. And y'all can say, yep, let's do this. or not. And
Yeah,
so
but we want the whole list of things.
Yeah.
Not just, do we want to do one? We want the whole list, and then your
Well-
recommendation, which one's first?
And so that's why I wanted some clarification, because I want to make sure I heard you correctly. You want me to bring y'all the best recommendation, or do you want the whole list of stuff like we did here, and y'all pick and choose which ones y'all want?
No, both. I want a whole list of things
Okay.
and your recommendation about which ones we do first and what the timing is. And so you're the leader here. You lead us. We're just the overseers. We're trying to make sure you're the management that the city needs. And what the city needs is some really strong leadership right now. How do we get through this mess?
Yeah, no, and I think our teams are doing a great job with what they got. We were, looking at department roadmaps to kind of help with some of the compliance stuff that, you had asked for, and really some of the regulatory side of things to help understand like what each department is doing. And then of course the second flood really turned it on its head, on top of everything else. And so what we were already looking at for some efficiency stuff has really kind of been turned upside down again. And so it's that fine balance of our staff is working on overdrive. They are working on all of those things. And I agree. Yes, it's an investment. And even though the numbers may not reflect, let's say, as a reduction of it, I would say that the shifts of what we've done, and maybe I need to provide that information to y'all, and I can, that the stuff that we've done, even though it's not reflecting or decreasing on the numbers, it is efficient as an investment on what we're doing to maintain the services that we're providing for our residents.
Well, it may be efficient for that particular segment, but other segments must be leaking somewhere else. But that's a side thing. I mean, that's a peanut thing compared to the numbers we got to come up with to pay for the damage. And so, not to be, again, we got to do every little thing, and I did department by department all these here, and it's sorry state compared to inflation. The expenses are going up way more than inflation, and so that has to be looked at and hopefully controlled a little bit. But the bigger picture is we need leadership. How do you recommend us to get out of this, to get through this? We're not going to get out of it. How do we get through it? And we talked, yes, but let's have a list. Let's go down through the list, and then you say, well, these are the priorities. And if we think, well, we think this is a little different priority, we might reorder a little bit. But we're going to try to follow what you suggest. I mean, I would. My inclination would be say, well, you know what you're doing, but let's don't just sit here and just wait on us for how many months we've been talking about crime control district or whatever. Well, we're not doing anything yet.
Well, I disagree with that. We are, and we're looking into it. Obviously, it would have to go to the voters in May, and so that doesn't get, that election doesn't get called until January, February, and so there are some timeline things where it's not that we're putting them off. It's we're able to build capacity within our schedules by not doing everything right now because we have some time to get to that point. Because especially with everything with the voters, there's critical timelines and compliance with that. And so we're able to build capacity within our
We
schedules.
just need to get that all planned out.
Yes, sir. We can do that.
So I have a question on kind of falls in line with what Kent is saying, reserves. How much is in our reserves?
Julie?
14 million, give or take, in the general fund. And we're about 32% right now, which we shoot for 25%. But again, you have to look at impact 10 years from now. We have to make sure we maintain above that. So
Right.
one of the things that,
So it's not all available, that 14 million?
well, it's available. It's just a
Well,
matter of
Has it
how
had the
far do you
future?
want to bring that down as far as reserves for everyday.
Two floods
that
and
will-
one reserve.
At one,
Well, and I know that, we are in an emergency situation, I feel like, or I wouldn't have even brought this up. But
For
I
sure.
do think, I would like to know, how we go about using the
So-
reserves.
yeah, that's a good question. And so as part of our forecasting, and I can tell you right now because we just did this. Good. So, our forecast, and this is in the budget book as well, we have an over-under reserve dollar. And so that's kind of what we look at is, yeah, she was playing with that. So as of 25, is this 25, 26?
This is 27.
Okay, so going out, so we're looking at, by 2030, we're at about that 25%. Right now, we're about 33%. So over under reserve by, as of today, $3 million. Now, you draw that down, obviously it would be through a budget amendment or a transfer of funds, and we would have to go in and ask council permission to actually move those dollars, say from the general fund to capital improvements fund to be able to fund some of these
Yeah,
projects for repairs, so.
So to answer your question, once we know more, like obviously we have big numbers and those are kind of FEMA drive numbers. Once we can dive into the specific projects of the disaster or really anything, then we will come to y'all with recommendations of, hey, we believe that we can draw down the reserves, here, we would present that to y'all, do a budget amendment, and then we can draw down those reserves. Again, yes, that's what the reserves are for, is designed like this. And so we just want to make sure that we don't just do it on a regular budget year. We want to make sure we use it disaster appropriate or project appropriate based off of what we want to do. So we will have those recommendations once we can get some good numbers on where we think it will be most beneficial.
So can we use more than the excess?
If council, that's what a rainy day fund is for. So yes, if council says, hey, this is appropriate and we need to do this, and of course we'll work with the attorneys on everything, but yes, that's what a rainy day fund is for. So
Then we'd have to budget somehow, get back to there,
That's
correct.
Not
but
as a one-time.
it doesn't mean we can't take it.
Correct.
That's right.
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much.
Any other comments or questions? This has been an interesting discussion. Hearing none, let's go ahead and adjourn the meeting at 11:51.